The marble floors of the palace gleamed like frozen tears beneath the chandeliers, each crystal catching light and scattering it across walls that had witnessed 3 centuries of rule. I pressed my back against one of those walls now, my pale blonde hair tucked behind my ears in a futile attempt to look presentable, to look like I belonged among the elegantly dressed nobles who filled the grand reception hall. The air hung thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and something darker, fear, perhaps, or grief, dressed in expensive perfume. They called it a vigil, a gathering of the most powerful werewolf families from across the territories, supposedly united in prayer for King Dominic Ashenheart, the Alpha King who lay dying 3 floors above us, but I could hear the whispers, sharp as broken glass beneath the orchestrated sympathy. Succession plans, territory negotiations. The vultures were already circling, and the king wasn't even gone yet. I shouldn't have been here at all. My invitation had been a clerical error. Everyone knew it, especially me. The daughter of a minor pack healer from the northernmost border territories had no place among the Silvermane dynasty representatives, the Iron Paw warriors, or the elegant Moonshadow diplomats. My dress, borrowed from my mother's youth, hung slightly too loose at my shoulders, my shoes pinched. And my wolf, that supposedly magnificent other half that every werewolf possessed, remained as silent and absent as she'd been since my 16th birthday 3 years ago. Broken, defective, wolfless, the labels followed me like shadows. They say he's in agony, a woman's voice drifted past, sharp with false concern. That even the royal healers can't ease his pain. The poison has destroyed everything. His wolf, his strength, everything that made him, him. A mercy, really, when it finally takes him, another replied. Better than lingering as half a creature. My fingers found the small silver pendant at my throat, a gift from my grandmother before she passed. She'd pressed it into my palm during her final days, her clouded eyes somehow still seeing me clearly. Compassion is its own kind of magic, little one. When everyone else sees weakness, you see wounds. That's not a flaw. That's a gift. Remember that when they try to convince you otherwise. I'd been remembering it constantly for 3 years, like a mantra against the sting of rejection from every pack I'd petitioned to join. Without a wolf, I was barely more than human. With only my healing knowledge inherited from my mother's patient teaching, I was nothing special, nothing powerful, nothing that mattered. The crowd shifted suddenly, a ripple of movement flowing toward the eastern doors. My heart jumped as the queen herself emerged. Queen Isabeau, her silver hair braided in an intricate crown, her face a mask of regal composure that couldn't quite hide the shadows beneath her eyes. Behind her walked 3 people I recognized from the official portraits. Princess Celeste, beautiful and cold as winter moonlight. Prince Gabriel, young and fierce with barely contained anger. And Lord Chancellor Hrothgar, the king's oldest friend, whose expression carried a grief too heavy for politics. The king has requested something. Queen Isabeau's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk. The hall fell silent. In what may be his final hours, he wishes to meet with any healer present who has not yet attempted treatment. It is a last hope, a desperate one. My breath caught. I'd heard the stories, how dozens of the most skilled healers in the kingdom had tried and failed. How the poison, delivered by an assassin's blade during a border negotiation 3 months ago, had been laced with dark magic that actively resisted healing. How it fed on the king's strength, his wolf, draining him day by day until now he could barely speak, barely breathe. Surely you're not serious, Your Majesty. The speaker was Lord Corvus of the Iron Paw family, his tone barely respectful. We've exhausted every legitimate option. All that's left are the lesser practitioners. His eyes swept the room and landed on me for just a moment, long enough for his lip to curl in dismissal before moving on. Nevertheless, the queen said, and steel rang beneath her exhaustion, those are the king's wishes. If there is anyone present with healing knowledge who has not yet been consulted, please make yourself known. The silence stretched. No one moved. Why would they? Everyone understood this was merely protocol, a dying king's last grasp at control. Everyone except my feet were moving before my mind caught up, carrying me forward through the crowd that parted not with respect but with surprise. I heard the gasps, the sharp intake of breath that always accompanied the recognition of what I was, or rather, what I wasn't. Your Majesty, I managed, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I have some training in healing. My mother is Elena Whitmore from the Northern Reach Pack. She taught me. The wolfless girl? Princess Celeste's voice dripped with disdain. Mother, surely you can't be serious. She doesn't even have a wolf to lend strength to any healing attempt. This is absurd. But Queen Isabeau was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Measuring. Searching. What is your name, child? Syrah, Your Majesty. Syrah Whitmore. And you believe you might succeed where dozens of skilled healers have failed? It was a test, I realized, an impossible question with no right answer. I could feel the weight of every eye in that hall. The judgment, the scorn barely held in check. My grandmother's pendant seemed to warm against my skin. No, Your Majesty, I said quietly. I don't believe I'll succeed, but if the king is suffering, and if there's even the smallest chance I might ease that suffering, even for a moment, isn't that worth trying? Something flickered across the queen's face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. She studied me for a long moment while the crowd held its collective breath. Then she nodded, sharp and decisive. Lord Chancellor, escort Miss Whitmore to the king's chambers. The rest of you, remain here. We will— This is madness. Lord Corvus stepped forward, his powerful frame radiating authority. You would allow this defective— I would allow my husband his dying wishes. Queen Isabeau cut him off with a tone that could freeze blood. As should we all. The walk through the palace felt endless. Lord Chancellor Rothgar said nothing as we climbed the curved staircase, but I felt his sidelong glances, his assessment. The halls grew quieter the higher we went, the sounds of the vigil below fading into thick silence, broken only by our footsteps and my thundering heart. He was the strongest alpha I've ever known, Rothgar said suddenly, his voice rough. In 300 years, he never backed down from a fight, never showed fear. Now he can barely lift his head. He stopped, cleared his throat. What you said down there, about easing suffering, that's more than anyone else has offered. They all wanted to cure him, to save him for their own purposes. No one thought to simply help him hurt less. We stopped before an enormous door carved with running wolves beneath a full moon. 2 guards flanked it, their faces grim. He may not even be conscious, Rothgar warned as he pushed the door open. The poison affects his mind as much as his body. If he says anything unusual, anything cruel, that's not really him speaking. I nodded, though my throat had gone dry. The room beyond was vast and shadowed, heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Candles burned at intervals, casting wavering light across tapestries and bookshelves, and a massive bed draped in deep blue silk. The scent hit me immediately. Herbs and medicine, yes, but beneath it something wrong, something that made my skin prickle with instinctive warning. Death. Not imminent, but circling. Patient. Your Majesty? Rothgar called softly. There's someone here to see you. A healer. A sound came from the bed. Not words. A rasp. A breath forced through damaged lungs. I moved forward before I could reconsider. Before fear could root me in place, the candlelight revealed him gradually, like a painting emerging from shadow. He'd been magnificent once. I could see it in the strong bones of his face, the broad shoulders that even now suggested immense strength. But the poison had carved him into something haunting. His skin, which should have held the warm tan of someone who spent time outdoors, had gone pale and waxy. Dark veins traced patterns beneath it like cracks in marble. His black hair, shot through with silver, was damp with fever sweat. But his eyes, when they opened and found mine, they were still brilliant, a fierce amber that held intelligence and pain, and something I couldn't name, something that made my breath catch. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, impossibly, his cracked lips curved into something that might have been a smile. An angel, he whispered, his voice like gravel and silk. Have I finally died then? No, Your Majesty. I moved closer, despite the warning prickle along my spine, despite every instinct that said I was in over my head. I'm very much alive, and so are you. Pity. He closed his eyes. For both of us. The words should have stung, but I heard only exhaustion in them. Surrender. I'd heard that tone before in my grandmother's voice at the end, when fighting seemed more cruel than kind. May I? I gestured to the chair beside his bed. He waved one hand weakly, permission or dismissal, I couldn't tell. I sat anyway, setting down the small bag of supplies Hrothgar had allowed me to retrieve from my room. My hands were steadier than I'd expected, as I pulled out various herbs and tinctures, the familiar ritual calming my racing thoughts. "They sent you because they've run out of real healers," he said, watching me through half-closed eyes. "Or because you're expendable." "Both, probably." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm wolfless, your majesty. According to most people here, I'm barely worth acknowledging." Something shifted in his expression. "And yet you came anyway. Why?" My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. I laid out my supplies on the bedside table, considering his question. "Because you're in pain. And because maybe, just maybe, sometimes the broken ones see things the perfect ones miss." His eyes opened fully then, fixed on me with an intensity that stole my breath. For a moment we simply looked at each other. The dying king and the worthless girl, two people who understood what it meant to be judged by what they lacked, rather than what they possessed. Then his expression shifted to something like wonder, or recognition, and he whispered one word that changed everything. "Finally." The king's chambers became my entire world for the next 3 days. Queen Isabeau had been skeptical at first. I'd seen it in the tightness around her eyes when I emerged from that first session with Dominic still breathing, still conscious, and claiming he felt marginally better. The court physicians had examined him with barely concealed suspicion, searching for tricks or deception. They found neither. The poison remained. The dark veins still crawled beneath his skin. But something had shifted. Some small measure of ease had entered his features. "What did you do?" Dr. Cassius, the head royal physician, had demanded. His silver beard quivered with indignation. "What mixture did you use?" I'd shown him my supplies, standard pain-relieving herbs, nothing exotic or particularly powerful. Willow bark, chamomile, lavender oil for the temples, things my mother had taught me during long northern winters, remedies for common ailments that any village healer might know. "That's impossible," he'd insisted. "We tried all of those. They did nothing." I hadn't known how to explain it, because I didn't fully understand it myself. All I knew was that when I'd touched the king's hand, just a gentle touch to check his pulse, something had passed between us. Not magic, exactly, not the bond that mated wolves supposedly shared, but something. A recognition. A resonance. And when I'd leaned close to apply the lavender oil to his temples, when my breath had mingled with his, and my lips had accidentally brushed his forehead, in what might have been mistaken for a kiss, his entire body had relaxed. The lines of agony had smoothed from his face. He'd slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Now, on the morning of the 4th day, I climbed the stairs to his chambers with a bowl of specially prepared broth and a new mixture of herbs. The guards no longer questioned my presence. They simply opened the doors, though their expressions remained carefully neutral. I wondered what they thought of the wolfless girl who'd somehow earned the dying king's trust. Dominic was awake when I entered, propped against pillows, and looking stronger than he had any right to. The dark veins were still visible, the poison still present, but color had returned to his face. His amber eyes tracked my movement across the room with an alertness that made my pulse quicken. "You're late," he said, and I caught the hint of amusement beneath the gruff tone. The kitchens were busy. Apparently there's to be some sort of gathering tonight. I set down my supplies and held out the broth. "Can you manage this yourself, or do you need help?" He took the bowl with hands that shook only slightly, a vast improvement from the trembling weakness of 3 days ago. "A gathering." How diplomatic. They're planning my funeral feast while I'm still breathing. Well, you're breathing better than you were. I busied myself preparing the herb mixture, aware of his eyes on me. "And your fever broke last night. That's significant. Significant enough that my dear children are probably panicking." He sipped the broth, made a face at the taste, but continued drinking. Celeste was so certain she'd be queen by now. Gabriel had already chosen his counsel, and now here I am, stubbornly clinging to life. There was bitterness in his voice, but also something deeper, loneliness. I'd heard it before in my own thoughts during long nights when the absence of my wolf felt like a physical wound. The loneliness of being fundamentally misunderstood by the people who should have known you best. "Tell me about your wolf," he said suddenly, or rather the absence of one. My hands stilled over the herbs. It wasn't a topic I discussed willingly. Most people used it as ammunition, as proof of my inadequacy, but Dominic's question carried no judgment, only curiosity. She never came, I said finally. 16th birthday passed, then 17th, then 18th. Everyone else in my pack shifted for the first time between 13 and 16. But mine, it was like calling into a void, no answer, no presence, just silence. That must have been terrifying. The simple acknowledgement nearly undid me. Not pity, not scorn, just recognition of the fear that had defined 3 years of my life. Yes, I whispered. It is. Every day I wake up and there's just emptiness where she should be, like I'm only half a person. You seem remarkably whole to me. I looked up and found him watching me with an expression that made heat rise in my cheeks. There was something in his gaze, not the lustful appreciation I'd occasionally seen from men who thought a wolfless girl would be easy prey, but something else. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. The poison, I said, needing to redirect the conversation before I drowned in those amber eyes. It's attacking your wolf directly, isn't it? That's why the other healers failed. They were trying to cure your body, but the poison is devouring my wolf from the inside out. He set down the empty bowl. Every day she grows weaker. Every day the bond between us frays a little more. Soon there will be nothing left, and then... He gestured vaguely. Then I'll be like you, wolfless. Half a creature. Is that what you think I am? Half a creature. No. The word came swift and fierce. No, Sarah. I think you're possibly the bravest person I've ever met. You walk through a world designed for wolves without one, and you do it with your head high. That takes more strength than most warriors possess. My throat tightened. I focused on grinding the herbs, willing my hands to steadiness. I brought you something different today. A mixture my grandmother used for spiritual pain rather than physical. I thought, if the poison is attacking your wolf, maybe we should try to strengthen her, support her. Even if we can't cure the damage, maybe we can ease her suffering, her. He smiled slightly. Most people think of wolves as it. She's not an it. She's part of you. The most essential part, maybe. I mixed the powder with warm water, creating a pale green tea. This won't taste any better than the broth, I'm afraid. He accepted the cup, our fingers brushing in the exchange. That same strange resonance thrummed through the contact, stronger this time. His eyes widened slightly. He'd felt it too. What is this? He asked softly. This thing between us? I don't know. The honesty felt dangerous, but necessary. I've never felt anything like it. He drank the tea slowly, thoughtfully. I watched his throat work with each swallow, watched the medicine take effect. His breathing eased further, the tension in his shoulders relaxed. And when he closed his eyes, I saw something that looked like peace settle over his features. Come here, he murmured. My heart hammered against my ribs. Your Majesty, Dominic. When we're alone, call me Dominic. His eyes opened, pinning me with their intensity. Please, come here. I should have refused, should have maintained proper distance, remembered my place. Instead, I found myself moving closer, drawn by something I couldn't name and didn't want to resist. When I reached the bedside, he lifted one hand and gestured to the space beside him. Sit with me. Just for a moment. The bed dipped as I carefully perched on its edge, hyper-aware of his warmth, his presence. This close, I could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could smell the clean scent of him beneath the medicinal herbs, cedar and rain and something wild. The first time you touched me, he said quietly, something changed. The pain didn't disappear, but it became bearable. And when your lips brushed my forehead, when you accidentally kissed me, I felt my wolf stir for the first time in weeks. Just a flutter, but she was there, present. I didn't mean... I know. His hand found mine, calloused fingers threading through my own. But intention doesn't negate effect. Something about you, Sarah Whitmore, reaches the parts of me that everyone else has given up for dead. The door crashed open with a violence that shattered the intimate bubble we'd created. I jerked away from Dominic as Princess Celeste strode in, her beautiful face twisted with fury. Behind her came Prince Gabriel and Lord Corvus, the latter wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. How touching, Celeste spat. The dying king and his pet wolfless healer. Did you really think we wouldn't notice what you're doing? I stood quickly, instinctively placing myself between them and Dominic. I'm helping him, that's all. Helping him. Gabriel laughed, sharp and cruel. Father's been dying for 3 months, resistant to every legitimate treatment. Then you show up and suddenly he's improving? It's obviously dark magic. You've enchanted him somehow. That's absurd, I started, but Lord Corvus cut me off. Is it? A wolfless girl with no pack, no prospects, no future, suddenly gaining access to the dying Alpha King? You're obviously using some kind of spell to seduce him, to secure your position. Perhaps you're even the one who poisoned him in the first place, planning this elaborate rescue from the start. The accusations hit like physical blows. I saw my future crumbling. Arrest, trial, execution for crimes I hadn't committed. My mother's shame. My grandmother's legacy tarnished by association. Enough. Dominic's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. He'd managed to sit up fully, and despite his weakened state, power radiated from him, the power of a king who'd ruled for centuries. You dare enter my chambers without permission and accuse my chosen healer of treason? Father, be reasonable, Celeste tried, her tone shifting to something meant to be conciliatory. You're not yourself. The poison has affected your judgment. We're only trying to protect you. Protect me? Or protect your inheritance? The words landed like stones in still water. Did you think I wouldn't notice how quickly the court began dividing my kingdom? How eager everyone was to see me dead? That's not fair, Gabriel protested, but his eyes wouldn't meet his father's. Dominic looked at each of them in turn, and I saw something break in his expression. Not anger. Disappointment. The deep, cutting disappointment of a parent, recognizing fundamental flaws in their children. Get out, he said quietly. All of you, and send for the Queen. I have matters to discuss with her. They left, but Celeste's parting look promised that this confrontation was far from over. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt heavy enough to crush. I should leave, I said softly. I'm causing you trouble with your family. Making things worse. You're the only thing making anything better. He slumped back against the pillows, the brief show of strength having cost him. But they're right about one thing. Something is happening between us. Something I don't fully understand. I moved to his side again, unable to help myself. Then let me keep trying to help, please. Whatever this is, whatever's happening, maybe it's the answer. Maybe it's what everyone else has been missing. He caught my hand again, held it to his chest where I could feel his heart beating. Stronger than it had any right to, given his condition. You could be executed for treason if they convince the court you're using dark magic. I know. And yet you'd stay? I thought of my grandmother's words. Compassion is its own kind of magic. I thought of the loneliness in Dominic's eyes. The same loneliness I'd carried for 3 years. I thought of how for the first time since my wolf failed to appear, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Yes, I said simply, I'd stay. His thumb traced patterns on the back of my hand, gentle and wondering. Then we'll face whatever comes together. But Sarah, if this gets too dangerous, if they move against you, I'm not leaving you to die alone. The words hung between us, heavier than any formal vow. His eyes searched mine, and I knew he was seeing past my wolfless status, past my inadequacies and fears, straight to the core of who I was. And I was seeing him, not the king, not the dying alpha, but the man beneath all those titles. The man who understood loneliness and pain, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, connection could heal what medicine couldn't. When Queen Isabeau arrived an hour later, she found us sitting together, my hand still clasped in his. Her expression revealed nothing, but her eyes. Her eyes held a knowing that made my breath catch. So, she said quietly, closing the door behind her, it seems we have much to discuss. Queen Isabeau moved through the room like winter itself, beautiful, precise, and utterly unreadable. She poured herself wine from the crystal decanter on Dominic's side table, took a measured sip, then turned to face us, with an expression that held 3 centuries of political experience. Before my children spread their poison through the court, she said, I need to understand what's actually happening here. And I need the truth, from both of you. Dominic's hand tightened around mine. Sarah has been helping me. That's the truth. I don't doubt that. You look better than you have in weeks. Isabeau's silver eyes shifted to me, sharp and assessing. But my daughter claims you're using enchantment. Lord Corvus is already whispering about dark magic to anyone who'll listen. And the court physicians are baffled by your methods. So tell me, wolfless girl, what exactly are you doing to my husband? The emphasis on wolfless wasn't cruel, merely factual, but it still made me flinch. I forced myself to meet her gaze steadily. I don't know, Your Majesty. I truly don't. I'm using simple remedies my mother taught me. Nothing any village healer wouldn't know, but when I touch him, something happens. Something I can't explain. Show me. It wasn't a request. Isabeau moved closer, her expression intent. I glanced at Dominic, who nodded encouragement, then slowly lifted my free hand to his temple. The moment my fingers made contact, I felt it, that strange resonance, like two notes harmonizing. Dominic's breathing deepened, and the pain lines around his eyes softened visibly. Isabeau inhaled sharply. I can feel it from here, the shift in his energy, the easing. She set down her wine with a hand that trembled slightly. In 300 years of marriage, I've never encountered anything like this. 300 years, I repeated softly, the weight of that timeline crushing. I'm 19, Your Majesty. I'm nobody. I shouldn't be able to do anything that your healers and your bond couldn't accomplish. And yet, here we are. Isabeau sank into the chair across from us, suddenly looking every one of her centuries. Dominic, what does your wolf say about this? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. She's drawn to Sarah, even in her weakened state, even dying. She reaches for her. It's like Sarah is water, and my wolf has been dying of thirst without knowing it. That's impossible, Isabeau said, but doubt flickered across her features. Unless... She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. There are old stories, legends about healers who worked not with magic, but with something else. Something older. They called them soul seekers, people who could touch the spirit directly, bypassing the physical entirely. Grandmother mentioned something like that once. I said slowly, memory stirring. She said our family line had an unusual gift, but that it had faded over generations. She said I might carry it, but without a wolf to channel it through. I trailed off, the implications settling over me like snow. Without a wolf, it might work differently, Isabeau finished. More purely, more directly. She turned to face us, decision crystallizing in her expression. The court will tear you apart if they think this is dark magic or enchantment. Celeste and Gabriel are already building their case, but if we can prove you're a soul seeker, that you're working with legitimate, if rare, ability, they'll still hate her. Dominic said flatly. They'll fear what they don't understand. Probably, Isabeau agreed. But fear can be managed. It's the accusation of dark magic that's lethal. She looked at me directly. Can you do it again? Whatever happened just now, can you repeat it? Strengthen it? I thought about the accidental kiss. About how Dominic's wolf had stirred when my lips brushed his skin. Heat flooded my cheeks. There might be a way, but it's intimate. Understanding dawned in Isabeau's eyes, followed by something that might have been amusement. Well, that does complicate things. She looked between us, reading what must have been obvious on our faces, the connection neither of us could deny, the pull that transcended logic. You care for him already. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. And you? She addressed her husband with unexpected gentleness. After 300 years together, after children and wars and centuries of partnership, you'd set that aside for a girl you've known 4 days? No, Dominic said, and my heart sank until he continued. I'd never set aside what we built together, Isabeau. You've been my partner, my friend, my co-ruler. But we both know our marriage was political, not romantic. We both know we've lived separate lives for decades now. He paused, choosing his words carefully. And we both know that what I feel for Sarah is different from anything either of us expected to feel again. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then, impossibly, Isabeau laughed, a sound rich with genuine mirth. Oh, the court is going to lose their minds. She crossed to Dominic and kissed his forehead with the easy affection of old friendship. But you're right. We've been partners, not lovers, for a long time. And if this girl can save you? She turned to me. If you can truly heal him, Sarah Whitmore, you'll have my support. Not because I want to step aside. I quite like being queen. But because I love this infuriating man, and I'm not ready to lose him yet. Your Majesty, my voice broke. I don't know if I can save him. I only know I have to try, then try. Isabeau moved toward the door, then paused. The gathering tonight is unavoidable. The noble families are expecting an announcement about succession, but perhaps we can give them something else instead. She smiled, sharp and political. Perhaps we announce that the king is recovering, thanks to the intervention of a soul seeker. Let them chew on that while we figure out what you actually are. When she left, the room felt larger and more dangerous. Dominic pulled me closer, until I was sitting fully on the bed beside him. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Any of this. Isabeau's right. The court will make your life a nightmare. And I'm still dying, Sarah. Even if you ease my pain, even if you give me more time, the poison is still there, still spreading. Then we work with what we have. I cupped his face gently, feeling the rough stubble against my palms, the warmth of his skin. You said your wolf stirred when I kissed your forehead. What if that wasn't coincidence? What if physical contact, intimate contact, is how this works? His pupils dilated, amber eyes going dark. Sarah, you don't know what you're suggesting. I'm not some gentle, dying old man. I'm an alpha, even weakened. And if my wolf responds to you the way I think she might, he swallowed hard. I could hurt you without meaning to. You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I said firmly. I do, because I see you, Dominic, not the king, not the alpha. You. And you wouldn't hurt me any more than I'd abandon you. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, the air between us charged with possibility and danger and something that felt inevitable. Then, slowly, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. It wasn't my first kiss. There'd been a boy in my pack once, before my wolf failed to appear, and he'd decided I wasn't worth pursuing. But this was nothing like that clumsy teenage fumbling. This was fire and recognition and coming home. Dominic's hand rose to cradle the back of my head, careful despite the trembling in his fingers. And he kissed me back with a tenderness that made my chest ache. I felt it the moment his wolf stirred. The air seemed to thicken, to hum with power. Dominic gasped against my mouth, and I tasted his wonder, his relief, his desperate hope. When I pulled back, his eyes were glowing faintly, not the full wolf shine, but present. There. She's here, he breathed. Sarah, she's actually here. I can feel her. The dark veins beneath his skin were receding, I realized with shock. Not disappearing entirely, but fading. The poison was still present. I could smell it. That wrong scent that set my teeth on edge. But it was losing ground. Again, he said urgently. Please, Sarah. Again. I kissed him again. Longer this time. Deeper. I felt his wolf rising to meet whatever gift I carried, felt the resonance between us growing stronger. My hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my palms, and his arms wrapped around me with increasing strength. The kiss broke and reformed. Broke and reformed, each connection sending waves of healing energy through him. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, the transformation was visible. Color had flooded back into his face. His eyes were bright and clear. The trembling in his hands had stopped entirely. How do you feel? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Like I might actually survive. He laughed, the sound startled and genuine. Like I might have a future instead of just counting days until death. A knock at the door made us spring apart like guilty children. Dr. Cassius entered without waiting for permission, his expression severe. He took one look at Dominic and froze. What? How? His medical bag slipped from nerveless fingers. Your Majesty, you're better, Dominic finished, thanks to Miss Whitmore's particular skills. Cassius rushed forward, professional instinct overriding shock. He examined Dominic with shaking hands, checking pulse, listening to breathing, studying the fading veins with wide eyes. This is impossible. The poison should be stronger now, not weaker. Nothing should have changed except he looked at me with something between awe and fear. "What are you?" "A soul seeker," I said, using Isabeau's explanation like a shield. "Apparently." "I thought those were myths." "So did I." He continued his examination in stunned silence, making notes with methodical precision. Finally, he straightened and addressed Dominic directly. "Your Majesty, I don't understand how, but you're significantly improved. The poison is still present, but it's dormant, contained. If this progress continues," he shook his head in disbelief, "you might actually recover. Make sure the court knows that," Dominic said, "especially those who've been so eager to plan my funeral." After Cassius left, carrying news that would spread through the palace like wildfire, Dominic and I sat together in the fading afternoon light. His arm was around my shoulders, solid and warm and alive in a way it hadn't been days ago. My head rested against his chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heart. "They'll never accept this," I said softly. "Us. A wolfless nobody and the Alpha King. Then they'll have to get used to disappointment." His lips brushed my hair. "You saved my life, Sarah. You reached into the darkness where I was drowning and pulled me back. Do you really think I'd let you go now? Your children will adapt or find themselves irrelevant." His voice hardened. "Celeste and Gabriel have shown me who they truly are these past months. Isabeau was right to be concerned about succession. They're not ready to rule. Perhaps they never will be. And the court? The noble families who think I'm using dark magic will learn that their king's displeasure is still something to fear." He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "I'm not giving you up, Sarah Whitmore. Not for politics, not for propriety, not for anything. Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. In 4 days, my entire life had transformed. The rejected, wolfless girl had somehow become essential to the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely insane. It was also, I realized with crystalline certainty, exactly where I was meant to be. "The gathering tonight," Dominic said thoughtfully. "I should make an appearance. Show them I'm not dead yet." "You're not strong enough for that. I'm stronger than I've been in months, thanks to you." He stood, testing his legs, and managed to stay upright with only minimal wavering. "Besides, we need to make a statement. Show them that their plans for succession are premature." He smiled, fierce and political, and introduced them properly to the woman who saved their king. Terror and excitement warred in my chest. "Dominic, I don't know if... Trust me," he said, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. "Tonight, everything changes, for both of us." He kissed me again, sealing the promise, and I tasted our future in it, complicated and dangerous, and absolutely worth fighting for. The grand ballroom had been transformed into something between a wake and a political battlefield. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across hundreds of elegantly dressed nobles, all wearing expressions that ranged from false sympathy to barely concealed ambition. I stood at the entrance beside Queen Isabeau, my borrowed dress, this time actually fitted to my frame, courtesy of the Queen's own seamstress, feeling like armor that might not be strong enough for the war ahead. "Breathe," Isabeau murmured, her hand light on my arm. "And remember, you've already won the most important battle." He's alive. Everything else is just theater. The doors opened, and a hush fell over the assembly like snow-muffling sound. Lord Chancellor Rothgar stepped forward, his voice carrying across the vast space. "Your Majesty, honored guests, we gather tonight at what we believed would be a solemn occasion, but it seems the fates have other plans." He stepped aside, and Dominic entered. The gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. He walked steadily, no trembling, no weakness visible in his bearing. He dressed in formal black with silver threading, the colors of House Ashenheart, and he looked every inch the Alpha King who'd ruled for 3 centuries. The only concession to his recent ordeal was the walking stick he carried, but even that he wielded like a scepter rather than a crutch. Behind him walked Princess Celeste and Prince Gabriel, their faces carefully neutral masks that couldn't quite hide their shock and, if I was reading correctly, disappointment. "My loyal subjects," Dominic's voice rang out, strong and clear. "I apologize for alarming you with reports of my imminent demise. As you can see, such reports were premature." Uncertain laughter scattered through the crowd. I watched the nobles exchange glances, recalibrating their positions, their plans. Lord Corvus looked particularly thunderous, his ambitions for a regency clearly crumbling. I owe my recovery to several people, Dominic continued. To my physicians, who labored tirelessly despite the poison's resistance to conventional treatment. To Queen Isabeau, whose strength held this kingdom together when I could not. And most especially, his eyes found mine across the room. To Miss Sarah Whitmore, whose unique gifts succeeded where all other methods failed. Every head turned toward me. The weight of their attention felt physical, crushing. Isabeau's hand tightened on my arm, anchoring me, supporting me. Miss Whitmore is what our ancestors called a soul seeker, Dominic explained. A healer who works with the spirit directly, reaching places that traditional medicine cannot touch. Her intervention didn't just treat my symptoms. It restored my connection to my wolf, strengthened what the poison had been destroying. A convenient explanation, Lord Corvus called out, his voice sharp with challenge. But how do we know this isn't simply dark magic disguised with pretty words? How do we know she didn't cause the poisoning in the first place, planning this elaborate rescue? Murmurs of agreement rippled through sections of the crowd. I felt my carefully constructed courage beginning to crack. Careful, Corvus. Dominic's tone went cold and dangerous. You're accusing my savior of treason. That requires proof, not speculation born from disappointed ambition. I have questions, Your Majesty. If I may. The speaker was Lady Morgaine of House Moonshadow, one of the oldest and most respected nobles present. She moved forward with the grace of centuries, her silver hair braided with moonstone beads. This gift, soul-seeking, you call it. Why has it never manifested before? Why has this girl lived 19 years without anyone recognizing what she was? It was a fair question, asked without malice. Isabeau glanced at me, giving silent permission to answer for myself. I don't know, my lady, I said, forcing my voice to steadiness. My grandmother spoke of unusual gifts in our bloodline, but I always thought they'd passed me by, especially when my wolf never came. I thought I was broken, defective. Maybe... I took a breath, committing to the vulnerability. Maybe the gift was there all along, but I needed to be broken first to access it. Maybe being wolfless freed something else. Silence greeted this admission. Then Lady Morgaine nodded slowly. There is wisdom in that. The old stories speak of soul seekers as being separate from the pack bonds, able to move between worlds precisely because they stood apart from them. She looked at Dominic. Your Majesty, if this girl truly carries such a gift, she is invaluable. She should be protected, honored, not questioned like a criminal. Thank you, Lady Morgaine, Dominic said. I'm pleased someone remembers the old ways. But Princess Celeste stepped forward, her beautiful face set in determined lines. With respect, Father Lady Morgaine, we're being asked to accept a great deal on faith. A wolfless girl appears from nowhere, gains access to the dying king, and suddenly he's recovering through methods no one can verify or replicate. Forgive me if I find that concerning. What would convince you, daughter? Dominic's voice held a challenge. What proof would satisfy your concerns? Celeste's smile was sharp. Let her demonstrate this gift publicly. If she's truly a soul seeker, let her heal someone else. Prove this isn't specific enchantment targeted at you. My blood ran cold. I'd barely understood what happened with Dominic. Had no idea if I could replicate it with anyone else. The connection between us felt unique, personal, not something that could be performed on demand like a parlor trick. That's reasonable, Lord Corvus agreed quickly, sensing opportunity. A public demonstration would settle all questions. Dominic's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a voice called out from the crowd. I'll volunteer. A young man pushed forward, barely more than a boy, really, perhaps 17. His right arm hung useless at his side, twisted and scarred. I'm Finn, from House Riverrun. Training accident 6 months ago. 3 healers tried and failed to restore function. If Miss Whitmore can help me, I'll testify to her legitimacy. The crowd parted for him, curious and skeptical in equal measure. I looked at Dominic, panic rising in my throat. He moved to my side, his presence solid and reassuring. You don't have to do this, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. I can refuse the challenge, claim it's beneath the dignity of... No, I interrupted softly. They need to see. And maybe I can help him. I approached Finn slowly, studying his injured arm. The scarring was extensive, the muscles beneath atrophied from months of disuse. This wasn't poison or spiritual damage. This was physical trauma that had healed badly. "May I?" I gestured to his arm. He nodded, nervous but hopeful. I placed my hands gently on the scarred tissue, closing my eyes and reaching for that same sense I'd found with Dominic. That resonance, that connection to something deeper than flesh. At first, nothing. Just the rough texture of scar tissue, the heat of a body working to compensate for damage. My grandmother's pendant warmed against my chest, and I thought of her words, "Compassion is its own kind of magic." I stopped trying to heal and simply listened, felt, extended my awareness into Finn's pain, his frustration, his grief over what he'd lost. And there, beneath all of that, a flicker. Not his wolf exactly, but his spirit. The essential self that existed beyond the physical. "Tell me about the accident," I said softly, eyes still closed. "Training exercise," Finn said, his voice thick. "I was showing off, trying to prove myself to the senior warriors. Fell badly. My fault. My stupidity. Your courage," I corrected gently. "You were brave enough to push yourself, to try to grow. That's not stupid. That's what makes us more than our limitations." I felt the shift in him, the loosening of shame, the easing of self-blame, and in that space where judgment had been, something else could flow. I pressed my lips to the scarred tissue, not kissing exactly, but breathing over it, letting warmth and intention flow through the contact. The crowd gasped. I opened my eyes to see faint light glowing beneath my hands. Not magical fire, but something softer. Something that looked like moonlight given form. Finn's arm twitched, muscles that hadn't responded in months suddenly remembering their purpose. "Try moving it," I whispered. He did. Slowly at first, then with increasing confidence, his fingers curled and extended. The movement was stiff, unpracticed, but present, functional. Tears streamed down his face. "I can feel it." He breathed. Stars above, I can actually feel my hand again. The ballroom erupted. Some voices were awed, others frightened, but all were convinced. I'd done it. Proven the gift was real, was mine, wasn't tied solely to Dominic. Lady Morgaine began to clap, slow and deliberate, and others joined until applause filled the space. Even Celeste and Gabriel looked grudgingly impressed, though Lord Corvus's expression remained sour. Dominic was at my side instantly, supporting me as my legs went weak from the effort. "You were magnificent," he murmured against my hair. "Your Majesty," Lady Morgaine called out, "I move that Miss Whitmore be granted official position as Royal Soul Seeker, with all honors and protections that entails." "Seconded," another voice called. "Thirded." The voices multiplied. Dominic looked at Isabeau, who nodded once. Decisive. "Then it's decided," Dominic announced. "Sarah Whitmore, I name you Royal Soul Seeker, and place you under the direct protection of the Crown. Any who threaten you, threaten me personally." The formality of it should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt only exhaustion, and the weight of expectations I wasn't sure I could meet. But when Dominic guided me to stand beside him and Isabeau at the head of the room, when the nobles bowed in acknowledgement of my new position, I understood something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the wolfless girl begging for acceptance. I was someone the kingdom needed. Someone with value that transcended traditional pack hierarchies. The gathering continued for hours. Nobles approaching to congratulate or assess, conversations flowing around political implications and medical possibilities. I smiled and answered questions until my face ached, always aware of Dominic's steady presence beside me, but there were darker currents too. I caught Celeste watching me with calculating eyes, heard Lord Corvus speaking in hushed tones with other disgruntled nobles, saw the fear beneath some people's congratulations, fear of what I represented, of gifts they didn't understand. When Isabeau finally declared the evening concluded, I nearly collapsed with relief. Dominic insisted on walking me back to my chambers personally, despite protocol suggesting otherwise. The halls were blessedly quiet after the ballroom's chaos. "Thank you," I said softly as we walked, "for believing in me, for defending me. Thank you for saving my life." He stopped outside my door, turning to face me fully. In the dim hallway light, his amber eyes were luminous. "Sarah, what you did tonight, For Finn, for the court. That took remarkable courage. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it courageous. He cupped my face gently, thumb stroking my cheek. You're not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I rose on my toes and kissed him, needing the connection, the reassurance. He responded immediately, pulling me close and kissing me with an intensity that spoke of relief and desire and promises we hadn't yet voiced aloud. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I should let you rest. You've had an exhausting night. Stay, I whispered, then blushed at my own boldness. Just stay. I don't want to be alone with all of this. Something tender crossed his features. Then I'll stay. We settled on the small sofa in my sitting room, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. What happens now? I asked into the comfortable silence. Now we figure out how to keep you safe while the court adjusts to your presence. We research soul seekers, try to understand your gift better. We continue your treatment so I can fully recover. He paused. And we navigate what's growing between us. Love? The word escaped before I could stop it. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of experience. I've lived a long time, Sarah, long enough to know that what I feel for you is rare, precious. Whether it's love yet or will become love, I don't know. But it's real. It matters. And I intend to protect it. I closed my eyes, letting his warmth surround me, letting myself feel safe for the first time in years. Outside my window, the moon hung full and bright, watching over us, perhaps, or simply bearing witness to the impossible thing that was taking root between a dying king and a wolfless girl. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the court, or his children, or fate itself threw at us, we'd face it together. That, at least, was a certainty I could hold on to. 3 weeks passed in a blur of transformation, both Dominic's and my own. The king's recovery became the talk of the kingdom. Each day brought visible improvement, the dark veins fading to barely visible traces, his strength returning until he could spar with his guards again, his wolf fully present and vibrant. Dr. Cassius documented everything with meticulous detail, presenting findings to the medical council that revolutionized their understanding of spiritual healing. Other healers came from across the territories, hoping to learn from me, to understand the gift that had saved their king. I taught them what I could, though I was still learning myself. The key, I discovered, wasn't technique or herbal knowledge. It was connection, the ability to see past physical symptoms to the wounded spirit beneath. Some healers had the capacity for it, others didn't. But even those who couldn't replicate my specific gift left with new approaches to their craft. New ways of thinking about healing as something beyond just treating bodies. My chambers expanded from a single guest room to a small suite in the royal wing. Servants attended me. Nobles sought my counsel. I established a healing room where I treated not just the aristocracy, but common people too. Anyone who came to the palace seeking help. Finn became my assistant, his restored arm proof of what was possible, his gratitude manifesting in loyal service. But the greatest change was in my relationship with Dominic. We were careful at first, mindful of propriety and the court's watchful eyes. He would visit my healing room to continue his treatments, which still required regular contact to keep the poison's remnants fully suppressed. These sessions remained professional in front of others, my hands on his temples, gentle conversation about his symptoms. But when we were alone, professionalism gave way to something deeper. He courted me properly, despite the unconventionality of our situation. Walks in the palace gardens where he taught me the history of each cultivated flower. Private dinners where we talked for hours about everything and nothing. His 3 centuries of experience balanced against my 19 years of observation from the margins. He gave me books from his personal library, first editions of poetry and philosophy that he'd collected over lifetimes. I gave him honesty and presence, the gift of being seen not as a king or an alpha, but simply as a man. Isabeau watched our developing relationship with what seemed like genuine approval. She pulled me aside one afternoon in the library where I'd been researching soul seekers in ancient texts. "You make him happy," she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from mine. In all our years together, I gave him partnership, heirs, political stability. But happiness? That was never part of our arrangement. She smiled at whatever expression crossed my face. Don't look so guilty, child. I'm not wounded. I'm relieved. He deserves joy, especially now, having faced death so closely. You're very generous, Your Majesty. I'm practical. And I like you, Sarah. You're genuine in a court full of performance. She paused, studying me. But you should know, not everyone shares my perspective. Celeste and Gabriel are plotting something. I don't know what yet, but they've been meeting with Lord Corvus and several other nobles who opposed your appointment. Be careful. I was careful, but careful wasn't always enough. The attack came on a cold morning exactly 3 weeks after the gathering. I was in my healing room, treating an elderly woman's arthritis, when the door crashed open. 3 guards entered, not royal guards, I realized immediately, but private soldiers wearing House Ironpaw's insignia. Sarah Whitmore, the lead soldier said formally, you're under arrest for the practice of forbidden magic and conspiracy against the crown. My patient gasped. Finn, who'd been organizing supplies in the corner, stepped forward. On whose authority? Lord Corvus, acting with the support of Princess Celeste and Prince Gabriel. They've convened an emergency council meeting to address the threat Miss Whitmore poses to— Let me guess, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. The threat I pose to the natural order? To pack hierarchy? To their inheritance? The soldier's expression flickered with something that might have been respect for my directness. Those concerns were mentioned. Will you come peacefully? I could have fought. Could have screamed for help, triggered the protective protocols Dominic had established. But I thought of the elderly woman trembling beside me, of Finn's fierce expression, of how violence now would only prove their accusations right. I'll come, I said quietly. But send word to the king immediately. They escorted me through the palace corridors, not roughly, but firmly. Nobles stopped to stare, whispers following in our wake. Some faces showed sympathy, others showed satisfaction. We ended up in the formal council chamber, a circular room with high windows and a gallery for observers. Already it was filling with people, the trial clearly planned as a public spectacle. Lord Corvus sat at the head of the council table, with Celeste and Gabriel flanking him. Other nobles I recognized filled the remaining seats, those who'd never fully accepted my position, who'd been seeking an opportunity to challenge it. Miss Whitmore, Corvus began, his tone oozing false regret. We've convened this emergency council to address serious concerns about the nature of your abilities and your influence over His Majesty. Where is the king? I demanded. He should be present for any council proceedings. His Majesty has been detained. A sudden relapse in his condition has him confined to his chambers. Celeste's smile was sharp. How convenient for you that he's unable to defend you. Ice flooded my veins. What did you do to him? We did nothing. Perhaps your supposed healing wasn't as effective as claimed. Perhaps the king's recovery was merely temporary. A last surge before the inevitable end. She leaned forward. Or perhaps you've been poisoning him all along, keeping him dependent on your treatments to maintain your position. The accusation was so absurd I nearly laughed, but the faces around the council table were serious considering. They wanted to believe this. Needed to believe it, perhaps, because the alternative, that a wolfless girl had accomplished what all their power and privilege couldn't, was too threatening to their worldview. I want to see him, I said firmly. If he's ill, I should be treating him, not standing trial for crimes I didn't commit. You're in no position to make demands, Corvus replied. We have testimony from multiple sources about the unnatural nature of your abilities. Lord Chancellor Hrothgar himself admitted he felt dark power emanating from you during your treatments. That's a lie. Hrothgar's voice rang out from the gallery. He descended to the floor, his face flushed with anger. I said no such thing. I witnessed Miss Whitmore's treatments and found them remarkable, but entirely benign. Corvus waved this away dismissively. Your friendship with the king clouds your judgment, Hrothgar. We need objective assessment. He gestured, and a robed figure entered from a side door. A priest of the old temple, ancient and severe. Father Matthias has agreed to perform a spiritual examination. If Miss Whitmore is innocent, she has nothing to fear. The priest approached me with a ceremonial staff carved with protective runes. He began chanting in the old language, words I didn't fully understand but whose intent was clear, to detect dark magic, corruption, evil intent. The staff glowed faintly as he circled me, his eyes closed in concentration. I stood perfectly still, letting him work. I had nothing to hide. My gift came from compassion, from connection. There was no darkness in it. The pendant at my throat warmed, my grandmother's presence somehow lending me strength even across the veil of death. Father Matthias completed his circle and opened his eyes. He looked troubled. I sense unusual power, certainly, but darkness? Corruption? No. This girl carries something old, something I don't fully understand, but it's not evil. He turned to Corvus. She is no practitioner of forbidden magic. Relief and disappointment warred across the council members' faces. Corvus looked thunderous, but before he could respond, the chamber doors burst open with enough force to crack the wood against stone. Dominic strode in, and even I gasped at the sight of him. He was fully healed, not a trace of poison visible, not a hint of weakness in his bearing. His eyes blazed with amber fire, his wolf fully present and absolutely furious. Behind him came Isabeau, her expression glacial, and a contingent of royal guards. "What?" Dominic said with deadly calm. "Is the meaning of this?" The council members scrambled to their feet, suddenly uncertain. Celeste recovered first. "Father, you were ill. We were told you'd suffered a relapse. You were told a convenient lie by whoever informed you, hoping to remove me from the equation long enough to eliminate Sarah." He moved to my side, his hand finding mine. "Did you really think I wouldn't have protections in place? Loyal guards who'd inform me the moment anyone moved against her? We were concerned," Gabriel tried. "Her influence over you is unnatural. We're trying to protect your inheritance, you mean?" Dominic's words cut like blades. "Protect your political ambitions. You were so eager to see me dead that when I recovered, you decided to destroy the person who saved me rather than accept that your plans had failed." Silence fell heavy as snow. Celeste and Gabriel couldn't meet their father's eyes. Lord Corvus, however, straightened with defiant pride. "Your Majesty, with respect, your judgment is compromised. This girl is wolfless, an aberration. She shouldn't hold royal position or have influence over—" "Careful," Dominic warned, his voice dropping to a growl that raised the hairs on my neck. "You're very close to treason, Corvus." "Is it treason to state facts? She's not Pack, not truly one of us. And you're willing to elevate her above those with true wolf blood, true lineage. She saved my life when all your vaunted wolf blood and ancient lineage failed." Dominic's power filled the room, making the air thick and hard to breathe. "She reached me when no one else could. She healed me when your best healers had given up. And you dare question her worth?" He turned to address the full council, his voice carrying authority accumulated over centuries of rule. "I'm going to say this once, clearly, so there can be no misunderstanding. Sarah Whitmore is under my personal protection. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. Anyone who questions her position questions my judgment as king, and anyone who cannot accept that is welcome to leave my court and never return." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. One by one, the council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement, some grudging, others relieved the confrontation had ended. Even Corvus eventually bent his neck, though his eyes promised this wasn't over. But it was Dominic's next words that truly shocked the assembly. "Furthermore," he said, squeezing my hand gently, "I intend to make Sarah Whitmore my consort. Not immediately. We'll observe proper courtship periods, allow time for adjustment. But my intention is clear, and I expect the court to begin preparing for that reality." The gasps that greeted this announcement rippled through the chamber like wind through grass. Isabeau smiled, serene and knowing. Celeste and Gabriel looked like they'd been struck. Even I stared at Dominic with wide eyes. We'd discussed feelings, yes, but this formal public declaration was far beyond what I'd expected. "Your Majesty," I whispered. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said simply, turning to face me fully. "In 3 centuries, I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. Someone who saw my suffering and chose compassion over advantage. Someone who looked at my weakness and didn't see opportunity, but someone to help. You're the bravest, most genuine person I've ever known. Why wouldn't I want you as my partner?" Tears blurred my vision. Around us, the court was erupting in whispered conversations, shock and speculation running rampant. But in that moment, all I could see was Dominic, not the king, not the alpha, but the man who'd been dying and alone, and who'd found in me an unexpected salvation. "Yes," I breathed. Yes, I want that too. He kissed me then, in front of the entire assembly, publicly claiming me in a way that left no room for doubt or political maneuvering. When we separated, the chamber had gone silent again, but this time it held awe rather than judgment. Lady Morgaine stood and began to clap, slow and deliberate. Others joined until the chamber rang with applause that felt like acceptance, or at least acknowledgement that fighting this was futile. The emergency council dissolved after that, its purpose nullified. Celeste and Gabriel left quickly, their expressions unreadable, but defeated. Lord Corvus departed with a stiff bow, taking several allies with him. But others approached to offer congratulations, some genuine, others politic, but all recognizing the new reality. That evening, Dominic and I stood on the balcony outside his chambers, watching the sunset over the kingdom he ruled, and I was learning to navigate. His arm was around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, where I could hear his strong, steady heartbeat. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Everything that's happened? You could have had a simpler life." I thought about the girl I'd been 3 weeks ago. Invisible. Rejected. Convinced she was broken. I thought about my grandmother's words, about compassion being its own magic. I thought about finding Dominic dying, and choosing to help despite knowing it might cost me everything. "No regrets," I said firmly. "This life is complicated and dangerous and nothing like what I imagined. But it's mine. We're building it together, and that makes it perfect." He kissed the top of my head, gentle and reverent. "My remarkable Sarah, my healer, my salvation." "Just Sarah is fine," I murmured, smiling against his chest. "The rest is just titles. What matters is this, us, together, choosing each other." In the weeks that followed, we settled into our new reality. I continued my healing work, expanding to establish training programs for other potential soul seekers. Dominic fully recovered, the last traces of poison finally purged from his system through our continued connection. We courted publicly and properly, giving the court time to adjust while privately growing ever closer. Isabeau became my unexpected ally and friend, teaching me court politics and royal protocol with patient humor. Finn proved invaluable as both assistant and friend, his loyalty absolute. Even some who'd initially opposed my position came around when they saw the genuine good my healing brought to the kingdom. Celeste and Gabriel remained distant, their relationships with their father strained but not broken. Perhaps time would heal those wounds too. Perhaps not. But Dominic had made his choice, and he never wavered from it. 6 months after I'd first entered his chambers expecting to watch a king die, we stood together in the palace gardens during the first snowfall of winter. Dominic took both my hands in his amber eyes warm with love and promise. "Sarah Whitmore," he said formally, though his smile was anything but formal. "Will you consent to become my consort? To stand beside me not as subject or servant, but as partner and equal, to help me rule this kingdom with the same compassion and courage you showed a dying king?" I thought of my grandmother, wishing she could see this moment. I thought of my mother in the Northern Territories, who'd wept with joy when I'd written to tell her everything that had happened. I thought of the wolfless girl who'd believed herself worthless, and the woman she'd become, not despite her differences, but because of them. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and certain. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed me as snow fell around us, gentle and magical, and I tasted our future in that kiss. Long and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. The broken girl and the dying king, healed by connection, by compassion, by the simple revolutionary act of seeing each other truly. Later, when the betrothal was announced and the kingdom celebrated, when I wore the consort's crown that had been specially made for me, when I stood beside Dominic and looked out over the people who'd once rejected me and now chanted my name, I touched my grandmother's pendant and felt her pride like a warm embrace. "Compassion is its own kind of magic," I whispered. And it had been. It had saved a king, transformed a kingdom, and given a wolfless girl a place to finally, truly belong. The story could have ended there, in that moment of triumph and recognition. But life, I'd learned, was rarely so simple. There would be more challenges ahead. Political intrigue, those who'd never fully accept me, the complexities of ruling beside a man who'd lived centuries while I was still learning who I was. But we'd face all of it together, Dominic and I. the king who'd been brought back from death's door by an impossible kiss, and the healer who'd learned that her greatest weakness was actually her greatest strength. And that, truly, was the beginning of everything that mattered.